special senses. And so we're going to start with sight, and then we're going to go to taste. And so we've talked about what a sensory receptor is, and there are 70% of all of your sensory receptors are in the eye. We use vision to make sure that we can, see the world around us, make sure that we're, in the right area, etc., etc. There is fat behind the eye, and we know that the eye is protected by a bony orbit. We went over the skeletal system. And then there are some accessory structures that are with it, and we'll get into that. So this is what the eye looks like. We are going to actually dissect an eye, so you will get a chance to see the eye and some of its structures. Now, one of the accessory structures is called conjunctiva, and that is a membrane that lines the eyelids. It covers the whites of the eye. We'll again see an eyeball, and it lubricates and protects the eye. Then we also have something called a lacrimal apparatus, and we have a little lacrimal gland, and lacrimal glands secrete tears. And then the tears actually go into the nasolacrimal duct, and that's why when you cry, you often get a runny nose. And you can see we have a lacrimal bone also that we talked about earlier this year. Now the structure of the eyeball, it is a hollow sphere, and then there's stuff inside this hollow sphere that allows us to make sure that we can see. The wall is composed of 3 tunics. We have a fibrous tunic, a vascular tunic, and a sensory tunic. And then the internal cavity is filled with fluid. And we're going to again see this when we cut open the eye, but the fluid we call humor. And then we have a lens, and we have basically a posterior segment and an anterior segment, and we use the lens to determine what's in front of it would be the anterior segment and what's in back of it would be the posterior segment. So this is what it all looks like. Again, we are going to get into it. We will be able to see the retina, we'll be able to see the lens, we'll see the humors, cornea, pupil, iris, etc. Now, one of the tunics is called the fibrous tunic, and that is the outermost coat of the eye, and it is composed of sclera, it says posteriorly, and a clear cornea anteriorly. Cornea is basically the thing that you would touch if you touch the front of your eye where the colored portion is, that's called the iris, but if you touch that portion of your eye, you're touching the cornea. The sclera protects the eye, so you always think of like the sclera as the white of the eye, and then the cornea allows light to enter the eye through the pupil. The vascular tunic is underneath the cornea, and that's the colored part of the eye. Even though we have different colored eyes, we have blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, etc., we still only have one brown pigment, just like we do. That melanin is a brown pigment. But when you have less of that brown pigment in your iris, it actually refracts light and it makes it look blue, and that's where you get blue eyes. Now the pupil is in the middle of the iris, and it is an opening, and it's going to be regulated by muscles, so it can actually basically constrict or dilate to regulate light in if it's daylight or nighttime. The sensory tunic is at the very back of the inside of the eye, and it's called the retina, and that's really where we're making sense of what we're looking at around us. And so we're again going to see it. It has kind of a mother of pearl look to it, and we will be able to remove the retina when we get into the eye itself. So this is where we're going to absorb the light. We have a lot of neurons that are going to be firing. They're going to fire down something called an optic nerve, and it's going to go into the occipital lobe of the brain to be interpreted as an actual picture or thing that we can see. Within the retina, we have these neurons, like I said, it says ganglion cell axons, and they are going to run along the retina. They're going to be gathering all of the sensory information, and then they're going to leave through that optic nerve that I just mentioned. Then you have something called the optic disc, and this is the site where the optic nerve leaves the eye. And this portion, this optic disc, lacks photoreceptors, and so we consider it to be the blind spot of the eye. And so this is just showing you the optic disc, where that would be your blind spot. And then you can see that this is the optic nerve running out of the eye to the back of the brain, into the occipital lobe. Now the retina does have photoreceptors except in that blind spot, and so we have two types. We have rods and cones, and rods are going to help us kind of respond to dim light. They are used for us to have peripheral vision, and then the cones are going to be allowing us to see color, and so they have high acuity for color vision. So rods are going to kind of help us when it's light or dark, and then cones will help us make out coloration. And this is what the anterior segment of the eye looks like. And again, here's the lens, and the lens is determining what's in front of it. That would be the anterior segment, and then the posterior segment is behind it. Now the lens is a structure that is going to help us refract light. And when I say refract light, that just means we're bending light. And so the very first thing that bends light in the eye is the cornea. And then once it gets into the liquid, it's going to also bend. Then it gets through the lens, and the lens is going to then refract it even more. And so if your lens is perfectly shaped, then you're not going to need glasses, because then you're going to be focusing the image on the proper spot on the retina. But unfortunately, we don't all have perfect lenses, and with age the lens becomes a little bit more dense and it loses some of its elasticity to be able to refract the light perfectly onto the retina. Now light in general, we have something called electromagnetic radiation, and this is more of a physics thing, but it's definitely happening when we are seeing things. We have this electromagnetic spectrum of all different waves on Earth. Our eyes can only see the visible spectrum, and that would be what we always call like the rainbow, all of the colors of the rainbow. We can only see a very, very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And so you can see here's the electromagnetic spectrum, and we only see within this very, very small piece of it, and it's visible light. And you can see how it has been separated into the colors of the rainbow. So when we're refracting light, we are actually causing light to bend, and we're also changing the speed of those electromagnetic waves in that visible spectrum. And when that happens, it is going to create the images that we are able to see in front of us. So it's going to change speed, and when it says when the light passes from a transparent medium to another. So a medium just means it's going from, like gas can be, or air can be a medium, liquid can be a medium, and a solid can be a medium. And we have all of those things going on when we're talking about vision and light. Because in the air, the electromagnetic waves are moving, and when they hit the cornea, which is a solid, then it's going to refract, which means bends, and it's also going to change speed. Then it's going to go into a humor, which is a fluid, and it's going to even change speeds more and refract a little bit more. Then it hits the lens, another solid, and so it's doing this as it's going through your eye to make sure that the image gets onto the retina so it can be interpreted by the brain. So light passes through a convex lens, and it is bent. And so when it bends, it's trying to converge all of the light energy onto one place on that retina. And so on the retina itself, if you were to just stop at the retina, the image is upside down. And it is also a mirror image, so it's reversed right to left. When it then goes out the optic nerve and is interpreted by the brain, your brain then puts the image right side up so that we don't see things upside down and reverse side to side. So the pathway of light, as it enters the eye, it goes through the cornea. That's the very first thing that it hits. It goes through something called the aqueous humor. That's the humor in the anterior segment. Then it hits the lens, goes through vitreous humor. That's the liquid in the posterior segment. And then it hits the retina. And it's going to be refracted as it goes. It refracts at the cornea. It refracts a little bit in the humor. It enters the lens. It leaves the lens, goes into another liquid. And then finally, it's going to focus onto the retina. Now, we see things different if it's, close up or if it's far away. And light from a distance needs just a little adjustment for proper focusing. So you can see that you're looking at the R, and it is actually inverted or upside down once it gets to the retina. Now, when we say that vision is 20/20, we're going to get to that in just a second, but that means that you see what you should see from 20 feet out. And so that's why when the doctor is, or when you do those little eye tests, they have you standing a certain distance away from the letters on the poster. Now, close vision requires a little bit more because you are, trying to make sure that your eyes are focused on the same thing. And so you have to actually rotate your eyeballs medially. We call that convergence. You also have to accommodate. That means that the lens shape actually has to change. And we have these little ciliary muscles that are allowing for the shape of the lens to change depending on, further distance or closer up. And then you also have to constrict your pupil is surrounded by a muscle, and the muscle is going to constrict or dilate. And when it's close up vision, we are going to constrict the pupil so that we can make sense of what we're reading. And so this is just a picture of what's happening for close vision. And again, you can see that the image is inverted on the retina. Now, unfortunately, like I said before, not everybody's lens is the correct shape. Not every lens is allowing light to refract through properly. And so we have some people who are considered to be nearsighted or farsighted. If you have an emmetropic eye, that would be your lens is working properly and you don't need any corrective lenses. If you have a myopic eye, you are considered to be nearsighted. And so instead of the focal point being on the retina, it actually converges right in front of the retina. And so what we do is we use an extra lens in glasses or in a contact lens, and that is going to refract the light one more time to make sure that it gets corrected and it converges right onto the retina. If you have hyperopic eyes, you would be considered farsighted. And what happens in this case, the focal point, all of the light converges behind the retina. And when it converges behind the retina, you don't see as well. So again, you're going to use a convex lens to refract the light one more time to get it to converge properly on the retina itself. So this is what, these are pictures showing you. And so if you have 20/20 vision, like I said before, from 20 feet away, you see everything exactly like you should. You see it clearly, you can read things, you can see. As you get, or as people get their eyes checked and are diagnosed with, myopic eye or a hyperopic eye. Then they get into these numbers that would be like 2100. And what that is indicating is that at 20 feet, you see something, okay, so from 20 feet away from an object, you see something as if it were 100 feet, if a normal-eyed person was looking at it. So you're definitely not focusing properly, and you can't see that object regularly at 20 feet. So it's going to be blurry, etc. And then the numbers get larger as it